Have you ever heard of a tailgate meeting or a meeting to, kind of a project orientation before we kick things off? Depending on whether we're talking about safety or we're talking about just project expectations, having a practice of basically getting everybody on the same page is a critical step for you to be able to have a productive job site. So how do you run an effective tailgate meeting? Well, the first thing, you don't necessarily need the tailgate of a truck. What you do need is you need a process. You need to be able to have a predictable way that staff are accustomed to you walking through all the different components of the project and for them to be able to understand how they do their part. And so I love using the KnowHow app as a tool to run productive tailgate meetings, kind of team meetings on the job site. First thing you have to do is establish a simple process for how you want that meeting to run. Those meetings always start with a roll call. We have to identify who is there and who's not there. Very easy in KnowHow to be able to start that process and add a couple notes of who is there. Sometimes you can take a photo, take a selfie, and attach that to the process so you have a clear idea of who was there. Once that's done, move on to a step where it's really about oftentimes going over what are some of the safety risks on the project. Don't skip any steps. When you communicate safety to individuals and they see it in your face that you're not exaggerating, you're taking it very seriously, it helps them to know that you're safe. Oftentimes, guys and gals on site, at the end of the day, they kind of goof a little bit around safety, but they need to see that you take it very seriously in those types of meetings. At the end of the day, safety's serious. And so step 2, cover all the safety. Step 3 is you want to get into the scope of the project and be able to help individuals understand the critical things like timeline, what's ultimately being done, what's the root of the issue. So once you go through the scope of the project, after that, you want to be able to go through decision makers and ultimately who are the stakeholders involved. So oftentimes that means talking about who the customers are. Often that means talking through, things that matter to them. Sometimes there's a pet. Sometimes there's office hours. Sometimes there's where's we need to park, things like that. But all those are about understanding the stakeholders and what their needs are. From there, what we want to talk about is roles. What is everybody's role on the job going to be? Who's going to be responsible for what? And within that, this is a great time for you to be able to ask those individuals to open up their KnowHow app and make sure that they can access and ideally favorite the processes to complete the components of the job that they're responsible for. Once that's complete, it's very important to be able to take a moment to be able to explain all the different equipment and all the different sometimes chemicals that are on the job site, and make sure that people understand, again, where to access the information to use those pieces of equipment, those tools, those chemicals within the KnowHow app, and then to be able to answer any questions that they have. And then we want to talk about today's work. What are the projects for today? Where do we want to get to by the middle of the day, by the end of the day? How will success, what would success look like today? I like to take time at the end for any questions. And then one of the things that's often missed in good tailgate meetings, but I think it's important, is to come back and anchor it in something that matters to the company. Sometimes it's a word of encouragement. Sometimes it's a reminder of the values. Sometimes it's about, kind of pushing the team to be able to really pursue excellence. Sometimes it's calling back something from a previous meeting that someone shared that was a real encouragement, a real point of motivation to the team. But it's kind of that wrap up where you want to kind of, in a sense, kind of get everyone to feel like they're part of a team, encourage them, and hit home something that matters to the company. And then you break. Again, as you work through each step, okay, it's keeping a log in KnowHow. And like I like to practice is then that archives it so that if anything comes up and someone says, hey, did you run your tailgate meeting? It's easy to pull up and be able to say, yeah, this was who was there. Hey, look, here's even a picture of who was there. This is what we covered. This is when we covered it. And if you're like me, I like to even be able to enable location services. You can see I was clearly standing on site when we went through that. And that's how you run a great tailgate meeting using KnowHow.